Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. As you can see by the backdrop, we are in another AI-related tutorial, and today we're talking about the OpenAI stream parameter that you can pass into your API calls. And essentially what this stream does is it allows the answer to come back in chunks and not only wait till the answer is complete to come back. This can really improve the user experience by letting them see the answer as it's coming back and not have to wait who knows how many seconds for the entire answer to come back at the end. I still consider this tutorial to be in the experimental stage. I will be showing you my progress until now, which looks something like this. So this is my newest chatbot template, and I've set it up with the stream functionality so that if I, let's say, ask it to write a story, you'll see that the answer comes back in a stream, and we don't have to wait for the entire answer to be ready before it starts coming back. The reason it's still considered experimental from my point of view is that I still have some issues here with the word ordering. I'm not sure if the problem is on my end or maybe this is just some kind of innate issue with the stream functionality. It may have to do with internet speed. If you have any insights on that, I would love to see it or hear it. And yeah, if you're interested in learning how to do what I've done so far, then I will be sharing that in this tutorial. And let's get started. So before we get started, let me just go over my setup here. So what I've done is I've added a simple text box where we're going to display the text that comes back from the AI. And here we have a input where we're going to put our prompt and then a send button, which will make everything start moving. So that's what we have here, a very simple front-end setup. So this is just a one-time back and forth. This is not going to be a chat conversation. And in terms of backend, I'm starting off with a very basic call to the OpenAI chat completions endpoint. And this is what we use both in chat boxes, and it's also kind of, sorry, not chat boxes, chat bots. And it's also what is recommended for just a simple kind of one-off instead of the typical completions endpoint. And let's just start by showing what this does at the moment. So when I run this get answer function, I'm just going to refresh this and give it a run. And you can see here that it comes back with this answer from the AI endpoint. And here inside of choices, we have the actual message. Okay, and it comes back with a role, which is assistant, and the actual content, which is the 2020 World Series, etc. And this comes back at once, all at once. This is the complete message that is being sent. And what we're trying to do essentially is to receive this message in parts, okay, in a stream. And that will have the implication of us not needing to wait for the entire thing to be created by the AI, but as soon as it has one character or word even, it could send it over to our side and we could already display that for the end user instead of them having to wait for the entire message to come back. This one was obviously very quick because it's a very short message, but if I did something that took a little longer, for example, having a prompt like tell me a story or something like that, then the implications would be a little different. So let's head over to our call to the API. And this is something that I've showed already in numerous tutorials. So if this looks like gibberish to you, I do recommend checking out some of my other videos about OpenAI and kind of interaction with AI in general, and brushing up on that before heading over to this tutorial. If this doesn't look like gibberish to you, then we're going to go ahead and we are going to add a very simple parameter here to the body of our API call, and that is going to be the stream parameter. And by default, this is false. So let's just go over here to the documentation and take a look at it there. So if I go and check out, where are we here? Guides. Okay, chat. And here we are. This is the endpoint that we're using. And here, if I scroll down in the parameters, and you can see this parameter here, stream. And this is a Boolean. And by default, it's false. And if I turn it to true, then what's going to happen is that partial message deltas will be sent. And we're going to see what that looks like in a moment. And when the stream is terminated, it'll send data done. And unfortunately, a lot of the examples given online are all in Python code, which makes this a little more challenging because we're using JavaScript. So quite a lot of research and experimentation actually went into the making of this tutorial. So if you appreciate that, then go ahead and click the like button. And I'm just going to head back to our site, and I'm going to add the stream parameter true. Excellent. The next thing we're going to need to do is we're actually going to need to install another package to handle this fetch. Because Wix fetch, unfortunately, from what I saw, if somebody managed to solve this, please let me know, it does not support streaming responses, which is what we need to do in order to make this all work. So we're going to be using a package called Axios. And I'm going to go and install it here from our npm package manager. And essentially what this Axios package is a package that is a wrapper for fetch, for requests to a server. And it has its own kind of rules and way that it works. I'm not going to go too much in depth in terms of how exactly it works. I'm just going to be showing you very specifically how to implement it in this case. And first of all, we're just going to copy over the kind of this requiring the package and put it here right up top. Excellent. So now we have our package here inside of our backend. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a client for our call, okay, for our API call. And this is just how Axios works. If you're more interested in learning about Axios, you can go ahead, check out their documentation, watch an Axios tutorial. I encourage you, it's cool, but I won't be going too much into it over here. So let's just go and create that client. So I'm going to say const client. And I'll reveal all my secrets. I have this code written here already on the side, so I'm not doing this by heart. But I will walk you through it step by step. And this is Axios dot create. And here we are creating a client with headers. And the header that we're going to be passing in is the authorization header, which is essentially this same one here that we have in the options. Okay, so this is how we create a client with Axios, and this client is kind of an authorized instance which can then make calls to the API. Okay, that's just how the Axios package works. And to actually make the call, which we're going to do here inside of our try catch, we need to say that const response will be equal to await client.post. So you can see here that with the Axios package, the method is used in this way. So we don't pass the method in here with the options, but we say client.post. And that way it knows that we're using a post method to call our API endpoint. And we pass in the URL. And we pass in our body, which is all of our parameters over here. And we pass in the key element, which is response type. Okay, response type. And this is going to be stream. Okay, and this is the magic which makes it all work. And this is why we're using Axios essentially. And then once we get back our response, what we're going to do is we are going to return response dot data, which is essentially the body of our response. And then we are going to add an event listener. And this event listener is going to listen for whenever we get a data event. This means that our stream is sending over data. And whenever we get one of those data packets, one of those data chunks, we are going to run a callback function. And that function is going to take that data and it is going to just log it in the console, just so we can see what we're getting back from our endpoint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of our original handling of the response using fetch, because we don't need that anymore. And then our error here goes away. And I'm also going to get rid of our options here, because we are essentially authorizing using the Axios client, and we're passing our body in here. We have our method here, so we don't really need this anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, so now we have a new function, which is using the stream method. And now let's take a look and see what it looks like when we use stream. So I'm going to go ahead here. So now I'm going to go ahead and run this new getAnswer function. So I'm going to go ahead and click run. And you'll see that we have this converting circular structure to JSON error here, but that doesn't actually stop our function from working. And you'll see here that we got back a bunch of these buffer responses. Okay, and if I go into data, then you'll see that it's buffer data. This is a data type in JavaScript, and this is unintelligible. So this is not going to help us in terms of conveying the delta or whatever it is to our front end. So what we need to do is we need to coerce this into something that we can use, and that would be a string. So I'm going to add .toString, sorry, over here to the data. And this will take our buffer and coerce it into a string, something that we can actually read and understand. So I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to run our function again. And now we have something that we can work with. Okay, so you'll see here, this is essentially the translation, quote unquote, of the buffer into a JSON, or at least a string. And you can see here that we have data, we have an ID. So this looks quite similar to what we were getting back in terms of the messages from the regular call to the API without string. And the key element here is this delta. Okay, and this delta is the additional information that's being passed in this chunk. And you can see here that, for example, the delta is the role. And here the delta is part of the content. And here is more part of the content, and more and more and more. So it passes that answer that we saw before in little bits. So here we have world, here we have series. And essentially what we can do now is we can take this information and pass it to the user as we receive it. Okay, so if this was a much longer answer, then this would take a long time to come, but the user would still see something displaying as these chunks of data came through. One very important thing to point out here, and I personally struggled with this quite a while until I figured out what was going wrong. You can see here that inside of each data, quote unquote, so this data that's coming back, sometimes we have one chunk, let's call it, and sometimes we can have two chunks or more. Okay, so here we have two chunks. So what we're going to need to do is before we pass this to the front end, we're going to need to do several things. So we're going to first need to identify these chunks within this long string. So here I need to be able to identify that, okay, we have two data chunks, and we're going to need to kind of extract this delta and turn it into an actual object, which we can use to pass the content to our front end. And the way we're going to be passing everything to the front end is using Wix Realtime. If you're not familiar with Wix Realtime, I have some tutorials on that as well. I will put a little card up there so that you can go to that tutorial if you do want to check it out. So I'm going to assume some basic knowledge of Realtime now. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a subscription. So the person who from the front end will be subscribed to a channel, and these answers will be streamed to the channel as they come back, and that will create the person's message. And now I'm going to show you how to do this. Okay, so this is the Wix Realtime documentation. And this publish function is the key function in terms of making Wix Realtime work. And it essentially publishes a message to a channel that people subscribe to. And I'm just going to copy this code from here and head to the back end of our site. I'm going to add a web module and call it Realtime. And get rid of all that and paste in our code. And what we're going to do here is we are going to create a wrapper function. So export stream message to front end. And we're going to pass in here the, let's call it the data chunk, okay, that we got back. And we're going to pass in a resource ID, which is kind of like a sub channel within the channel. And our channel, so here we have a function. Oops, I didn't write the function. Export function. Excellent. And all of this is going to go inside of our function. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a channel. The name of the channel, let's call it chatbot. And the resource ID of the channel, whoops, the resource ID of the channel is going to be resource ID that we're getting here from our parameters of the function. And in terms of the message that we're sending here, so we could send the data chunk directly and process it on the front end. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use some helper functions to process this data chunk and then pass it into our publish function. And these two functions that I'm going to be using, I actually created with ChatGPT. So I just told it, explained what I needed to do. So let me put in the functions and then I'll run through them and show you what each one does. So I'm just going to copy over my two functions from over here and paste them right here on the bottom. And now I'm going to just run through them very, very, very quickly. So we have one function, which is the split data strings function, and that does the first thing that I mentioned. So it takes one of those data strings or data chunks, and it essentially breaks it up into different data chunks. So it takes, let me run this function here. Okay, get answer. So it takes this long string right over here and splits it into different chunks for each time we have the word data. And it does that just by identifying the word data and then splitting up the string and doing a bunch of calculations here. And essentially it just gives a result, which is an array of these split up data strings. Okay, so this is going to return an array. That's pretty much the most important thing here. And this, again, I didn't write this function. This function was written by ChatGPT. I kind of just explained what I need done here. I need to split this string based on when I have data, colon, etc. And then it gave me this. And here we have a second function, which is extract delta from string. So what this does is it uses a regex to identify the word delta, and then it gets whatever is after the delta and essentially returns it. It parses it, okay, and then returns it as an object. Okay, so essentially what we're going to be sending in the end to the front end will be an object with either that role or that content, depending on what the delta was. So what we're going to do here first, I'm just going to change this to data string, just so that we have the same wording over here. So data string and data string. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say const, let's call it data chunks equals, and these are not official terminology. These are things that I made up. So data string is that whole entire string, which might have several data chunks, okay? And this data chunks is going to be an array, and it's going to be an array that is created using the split data strings function. Just going to go split data strings and pass in data string, okay? And then I'm going to do a for each. So data chunks dot for each, because this is an array. So for each chunk, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract the delta. So const delta equals to extract delta from string, and then I'm going to pass in here Instead of string data, let's call this chunk. So we have the same terminology. And this is going to be the chunk. And then what we're going to do is once we have that delta, we are going to pass it into our publish function. So this is going to be essentially our delta. Okay, so before we even set up the front end, let's just check and see that this is actually working. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to add a log here. So console.log delta. And we're going to use this function here in our OpenAI file over here. And what I'm going to do is instead of logging data.toString, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this stream message to front end function. Okay, so here I'm going to pass in data.toString, and I'm going to comment out this console for now. And this we're going to import here at the top level. So import from backend / real-time. Okay, cool. So let's try running our getAnswer function again. And if everything is working, then we should see essentially the deltas being logged. If it's not working, then we're going to have a debugging session. So let's go ahead and try running that. Okay. So let's see what we have here. So we have the delta, which is role assistant. And then we have another delta, which is another delta, which is 202, etc. Okay, so these are the deltas, and these are all what's going to be sent to our front end. Okay. Done, done, done. Okay. Excellent. And this, what we have here for the delta not found or invalid, so that is the error that is thrown over here. So delta not found or invalid. And that happens essentially when we have that very last chunk or that very last string, which is the data done. So that was what we had over here. So data done. So this doesn't have a delta. So when we try to extract the delta from it, we obviously can't find it. And then our function says, oh no, there's a problem, and sends back null. And that's how we know that this stream has ended. Okay, that's my indication that this stream has ended. And we're going to be using that as on the front end as well. So now we're really ready to set up our front end. So I'm going to go over here to the home, and I'm going to create a function called send. And this is going to be the function that runs when we are sending our message. And this is going to be, does this even need to be asynchronous? That's a great question. We'll see in a moment. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import a few things. So we're going to import our getAnswer function. And whoops, we're going to import that from backend/OpenAI. And we're going to need to import the Wix real-time for the front end. Okay. So here in the send function, what we're going to do is first we need to get prompt. So const prompt will be equal to, and this is going to be whatever is inside of this input over here, which is conveniently named prompt input. So that's going to be here, prompt input dot value. And what we're going to do now is we're going to construct a message. And we're going to have, if you take a look here, so what I've been doing is I've been passing these example messages in. So we're going to get rid of these example messages, and we're going to be passing these messages to getAnswer. And another thing we're going to need to pass into getAnswer is a resource ID. And this needs to be passed into here as well. We didn't need it when we were just testing in the back end, but if we actually want to receive things on the front end to our channel, then from our channel, then we're going to need to have that resource ID. And we're going to pass in messages and resource ID. So this is kind of the structure. So we're expecting to have a system message, and we're expecting to have a user message. Okay, that's what we're going to be sending, and we're going to get back an assistant message. Because remember, this isn't going to be a chat, so this isn't a back and forth. This is just getting the content here of the assistant. So I'm going to copy these over, and I'm going to, in our front end, just say const messages, and that's going to be equal to an array. And we're going to have roles content, you are a helpful assistant, sorry, that's fine. This we don't need. And for the user, the content is going to be, okay, and these are the messages that we're going to send to our front end, to our back end. And we're going to call the await. So let's put this in a try catch. So try catch, await, whoops. Await get answer. And here we're going to pass in our messages. And we said we also need a resource ID. So for this resource ID, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a random ID. And I'm going to do that using something called UUID. That's another package that I already have installed right over here. And this is a package that is made for creating random IDs. You might recognize this kind of format from the Wix IDs in the Wix collections. They use a very similar format. So I'm going to put that right. No, I didn't even copy it. So let's do, I just don't remember it by heart because of that whole version 4 thing that you saw there. I'm going to copy this over. And hopefully I copied it this time. Go to our homepage and import that right over there. So I'm going to say const resource ID is equal to UUID version 4. Okay, and that'll just create a random ID. And I'm going to pass that right over here into our messages, resource ID. Awesome. And this is throwing an error because this is not an asynchronous function. Okay, awesome. So essentially, we're actually not really waiting for the answer back here because if you remember inside of getAnswer, we're actually just sending the messages to the front end using real time. So the answer that comes back here is actually not so important to us. What is important is to send this back using to subscribe to the channel that will be receiving the messages from the real time. Oh no. Okay. So what we need to do here is actually subscribe to that channel. So what I'm going to do here is do Wix realtime dot subscribe. And we're subscribing to a channel. So let's define our channel over here. So const channel is going to be equal to name chatbot, if you remember. And the resource ID is going to be our new random resource ID. So since we're subscribing to the same resource ID and we're passing that resource ID to our getAnswer, that creates kind of that complete loop where we get the messages that we're subscribed to. So here I'm going to pass in the channel, and then we're going to pass in the callback function. And this callback function, let's see if I remember. Okay, so let's go here to the documentation, and we have subscribe, and this callback function has two parameters. One is the message, and one is the channel. So I don't need the channel, but I do want the message. So I'm just going to put message right over here. And what we're going to do when we get that message, we're going to say const payload equals to message dot payload. Okay, this is a Wix real-time thing. So this message comes back with, let's take a look over here what it comes back with exactly. So it comes back with payload and publisher. Okay, so we just need this payload. And if we take a look over here, so we're going to take this payload, and before we even subscribe to this channel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let's call it full message. Okay, and this is going to be an empty string. And what we're going to do is every time we receive a payload, we are going to attach it to this string. Okay, but we first need to make sure that this payload has content and not, and it's not, let's say, the role. Okay, because if it's the role, then I don't want to attach it to the string. So I'm going to say if payload dot content, then we are going to say full message plus equals payload dot content. Okay, so if we have content, then we're going to attach the content of that payload to the message. And we are going to display that. Whoa, what's this? I don't know how that happened. So here we have our answer text. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to populate that answer text with the full message each time it's updated. Okay, so we're going to get a payload. It'll be part of our answer. And then we're going to say, okay, the full message is everything that we've had until now, plus this new part of the message. And then we're going to say, okay, update our answer text to include the most updated version with all of the payloads that we've received so far, which is all of our deltas, which is all of our content, which is all of our message from the AI. So there's a lot of terminology here that's kind of the same thing. I hope it's not too confusing. Here, let's just log our error if we have one. And I think we should be good. If payload.content, yeah. Okay, I'm confident enough to give it a try. I think it should work. Oh, let's just attach our send function to the send button. So send button dot on click, and we're going to run the send function. Okay, that should be good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to publish this, and I'm going to go and view the site. Okay, so let's try this. I'm going to say, write me a story, and click send, and let's see what happens here. Whoa! Okay, so you see that it's writing a story and it's coming back one word at a time. Yeah, so that's working. I'm very happy. You could see that, for example, if I just take a look right over, I think I caught it like out of the corner of my eye. I don't know where it is, but I thought I saw, oh, here. And her friends bravely soar against her minion. Okay, so you see here it's like a little messed up. So I've been seeing that in terms of the stream. I'm not really sure how to solve that at the moment, to be honest. As you can see, like from this entire text, it happened once, which is pretty good, or maybe even twice here. Um, yeah, so that is something to keep in mind that with this current solution, there are some kind of discrepancies in terms of the deltas and when they come back and how they're sent in the order that they're presented in. So that might be something that you want to like put as like a disclaimer for people or something like that. Um, yeah, here you could see here that it's kind of like a little messed up here. Yeah. So I'm still working on how to fix that, to be honest. If anybody has any ideas, please do let me know. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it kind of helps you go in the direction of getting your streams working for your AI chatbots or whatever you're building there. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.